Okay, so the cover for this video is a little bit of a clickbait. Please do not attach your GFX to diver propulsion vehicle. It's not ready for that, I can tell you that. Yes, it's take anywhere camera, but don't take it that literally. That said, it has been almost 5 months since I got this camera. Last time when I did my initial impressions, I've used it for 2 weeks and I tried to formulate as educative of this impression as I could, but since then I had a lot of time to spend with the camera. I took it on a trip to New Zealand, I took it on hikes, on day trips, I tried to use it in a variety of conditions, and I think I have much better idea of how does it fit my style and what I think about limitation and strength of this camera. So last time I presented the chart where I showed my best guess on how often I think was my style of photography. You would appreciate having medium format camera for its color depth and dynamic range versus how often you will miss camera with faster leans and in-body image stabilization, which allows you to shoot at lower ISO. And in how many cases I don't think it would matter at all. And my hypothesis was, in most cases, it's not going to matter at all, but if anything, probably more often you will miss stabilization. So I decided to put this to the test explicitly. I ran a comparison of Fuji with this Ricoh GR3. This is a 6-year-old camera. It's a fantastic camera. I bought it to use it during training when I do some tactical exercises. Those are the cases where I cannot afford to have a camera bag, and this is the only pocketable camera with large sensor I'm aware of. If by large sensor we mean something bigger than 1 inch. Now, there are a lot of cameras that are compact-ish, including Fuji's own X100 series, recently released Sony RX1 and its predecessors, but they're not truly pocketable. They're not flat enough to fit in a pocket. Basically, they fit in a small camera bag or very, very large jacket pocket. I'm talking about truly pocketable one. This is literally the only camera. Now, if we had to compare those two cameras side by side, there are some things that missing from GR that would not make it my main camera. One of those things is being weather resistant. Also, GR does not have either electronic or optical viewfinder, which for me is a little bit of a deal breaker when it comes to my main camera. But as a camera that I can pull out in the middle of action and snap some action shots, this is actually fantastic, and that's why I like it. Now, why did I pick this camera specifically? It's APS-C camera, so clearly much smaller sensor and actually much older sensor than GFX. It's 28mm equivalent, so even though aspect ratio is not exactly the same, it's more or less the same angle. The lens is a little bit faster. This one is f2.8, whereas Fuji is f4. And this camera has in-body stabilization, which is, I think, the main thing that makes sense to compare to. So I went out one day and I spent several hours shooting side by side, where literally I was trying to take pictures as in as similar settings as possible, shooting next to each other seconds apart. Now, I was careful not to blow out highlights the same way I would do it if I was shooting each of those cameras independently. And then I processed them in the way I would like images to look. I wasn't trying to retain highlights at this point. I was going for the best aesthetic effect. And I was curious how often I will be able to notice obvious difference in the quality of the image. And the answer matched actually pretty close to my chart and my expectations. In majority of the images, I really couldn't tell apart one from the other except for the aspect ratio. Images after post-processing looked extremely close even on a fairly large monitor. Even though obviously as you increase the size or try to print images on some very large canvas, you will appreciate having 100 megapixels. If anything, I found few instances where I really appreciated in-body image stabilization. I was shooting in one of the historic sites that had a barn, which was very poorly illuminated. And in this case, I was able to handhold GR quite well at 1/7 of a second, which allowed me to shoot at fairly low ISO, whereas with GFX I had no other option but to bump up my ISO, and that manifested itself in the noise that I had to correct for. The one case where I absolutely appreciated what Fuji medium format and its compact form factor has to offer is I went on a hike in Pinnacles National Parks, which is not too far from my house, couple-hour drive. It's fairly strenuous hikes. At 9 miles goes uphill half of the way and downhill the other half of the way. So I didn't want to take a lot of gear. It would really weigh me down. I took just my GFX camera. I have a camera wrap that I use, and I threw it in my normal day pack that I take with me on the hikes. So it was actually very refreshing to be able to use medium format camera for those types of shots. And specifically, you go through many areas where there are very bright rocks and fairly deep shadows. And in those cases, I know from my experience, even shooting with full frame, you would have hard time balancing the image so you both don't blow out highlights and you can still retain some detail in the shadows. And medium format did very well in this scenario, as well as obviously providing really high quality images. So this was fantastic to be able to have something like this in my day pack. It's not completely weightless, but at the same time it's definitely much lighter than having a full frame camera with a bunch of lenses. And medium format shined in this specific case with a bright, almost white rock and hard shadows. Now, me and my son also went for a week to New Zealand. It's winter in New Zealand right now, so I honestly expected a little bit more snow. There was not too much snow on the ground, but I took Fuji with me, as well as Ohm Systems M3. I spoke about M3 before and how much it impressed me, and honestly I was surprised how often I use this camera now. Now, the main reason why I brought Ohm Systems with me, not so much for comparison, but there is wildlife photography that I wanted to do, and it's much easier to bring telephoto lenses for Micro Four Thirds. So this was the primary reason. But also I found myself shooting in a few conditions inside buildings where Ohm Systems was still superior because of the stabilization and gave me a little bit more flexibility because of the zoom. For most of the trip though, I was shooting Fuji medium format, and that was fantastic. The image quality was great, and similar to my hiking trip in Pinnacles, sometimes in fjords you would encounter very high contrast between rocks and sun and sky. In those cases, it was great to have the color depth and dynamic range of the medium format sensor. But given that with Fuji I have to shoot with a tripod much more often, I pretty much assembled this tripod from different legs, different head, and I picked those so they're faster to operate. Otherwise, honestly, I would not be using it as often. So this tripod is very light. It's maybe a touch less compact than some of my other compact tripods, but it's still full size. Now, one nice thing, it's multi-segment, but I can open all of the segment with a single twist, and similarly also fold those legs with a single twist. AT125 tripod, if you're interested. I also paired it, so the head itself is pretty generic head. It's I picked it mainly because it's light and compact. I have several of those that are similar. They're not necessarily the most definitive when it comes to locking. Locking plate by PGY Tech. There we go. And the reason why I did that, together with my small rig frame, you can basically lock in camera in 1 second, and it's firm enough, and similarly you can release it extremely quickly. So I found this a very convenient combo. It's high enough to typically clear most of the obstacles you want to shoot over. It's light enough, it's fast to operate. So Something like this would be great. I took it both on the hikes, I took it on my trip to New Zealand. I probably could not imagine other tripod doing much better in terms of kind of combination of being light and fast to operate. Okay, now talking about some of the other features that everybody who reviewed this camera highlighted. I'm talking about the digital zoom and this selection window for different aspect ratio. I noticed that a lot of reviewers who were invited to the initial unveiling mentioned how those features grew on them as they used them throughout the day. This was not my experience during the 5 months. Maybe I should have been invited to the unveiling and they would grow on me, but I was not, so they did not. I actually did not find myself using them once. And while I played with them initially in the first couple of weeks, after that I basically forgot about them and I tried not to touch them by accident, not to mess things up. So I still don't believe those are super interesting features to have. Definitely feature this prominently. I would love to have some of the other controls to use in their place. So image stabilization is by far the biggest missing feature from this camera. I am pretty sure that 3 or 4 years from now, the next version of this camera will have IBIS. Unfortunately, it is 3 or 4 years from now. Until then, I still like this camera a lot. I appreciate the images that come out of it. I, in some sense, kind of like the challenge, the fact that it is a little bit more difficult to use because of stabilization. Sometimes I need to bring tripod. That said, it's definitely a limitation in my books. And if somebody is looking for a single camera to take anywhere, probably Fuji's own X100 would be higher on my list than this camera. I do own X100 Model 5, and that one is much more versatile, even though it doesn't have in-body stabilization, but it's smaller, it has faster aperture lens. New one, X106, that has stabilization is truly versatile, and I think it's a fantastic camera. I just, for myself, I don't think there is enough difference here to upgrade. Now, finally, while I was testing this camera, reviewing this camera, Sony obviously announced their successor in RX1 line of cameras. I owned original RX1, and I like this camera. Back then it was the first full format camera that was this compact. It is still the most compact line of full frame cameras. Made some nice pictures even though focusing was super underpowered. Missed and it take a while to hunt and zero in. Now, based on all of the reviews, focusing is fantastic. Sony is really good in focusing these days, and they were able to use some of this technology in RX1 line. Now, question is, would I prefer to have RX1 III, the newly released one, over this one? And my answer still would be no, which may come as a surprise to some because, so number one, I actually like 35mm lens. I think for street photography, it makes you much more disciplined because you're more careful with composing images. 28, I find it great universal focal length for landscapes, but not so much for street photography, travel photography, etc. So I like Sony's focal length. Obviously it's a faster lens, it's f2 lens, this one is f4, but still no in-body stabilization. And probably one of the worst things about Sony is the lack of weather sealing. And weather sealing is a big deal for me. I really like shooting in the rain. During my trip to New Zealand, I shot under the waterfall, and I do not mean far enough where you still feel a little bit of mist on your face. I was pretty much up under it where water was really pouring on the camera, and it's great to know that camera can shoot in those kind of conditions. So for me, for the types of photography I do, which tend to be all weather, outdoor, etc., and I do appreciate articulated screen for some of the landscape shots. Now, if that one was weather sealed, probably I would have to go with the Sony one. Anyways, I'm sure it's still a fantastic camera, and I don't think I'll personally buy one, but I'm sure I would love to use one if I had one.